Okay, Steve. So,
Okay, I thought we were doing an interview, but you just want me to present. Is that what you'd like?
no, I will be asking questions, of course. Yeah, due to that technical issue, I'm not able to be visible, but there will be my voice. And as I mentioned, you are important here. Before we start, I've got one very important also information, because due to some reasons, we are forced to move the whole Congress to the online formula. For you, it's not a big change because you will join us online, but of course there will be a change on the participants' side. Yes, so they will also join online. That's unfortunately due to, very prosaic reasons connected with organization, financials, and venue. We hope that next time will be better and possible to do it on site, but this time we are forced to do it online.
Okay. Well, as you say, for me, I'm already coming online, so for me, it will not be different. But yeah, I look forward to potentially seeing people face to face in future.
Yeah, I hope it will be possible during the next Congress or any other form, which we will agree later. Great, Steve. Can we start with a short invitation from your side for the Congress?
Okay, so you want me to address people about what I will do in the Congress, yes?
Yes. Yes, if you can tell what you will do, when you will do it, and just invite.
Oh, well, you'll have to remind me just a moment.
Okay, no problem with that.
I need to look up the date.
What I will be doing.
All right, let me see. When is it? It's in on the 3rd of October. Okay.
Yes.
So my session at the Congress will be on the 3rd of October from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. And I will be doing an introduction to provocative energy techniques. And provocative energy techniques is an integration. It began as a simple integration between provocative therapy and energy psychology, or energy tapping, emotional freedom techniques. Was created by colleague Dr. David Lake from Sydney, and we had learnt provocative therapy from Frank Farrelly over many years and become good friends. And then we learnt EFT from Gary Craig, and ultimately we started to combine these techniques because we found that this tapping process, which is very, very good for shifting the feelings in the body and relaxing the hot body feelings, was very, very powerful when combined with the provocation and the humor and the heart connection from provocative therapy. Over time, we developed some of our own variations and distinctions. We simplified the tapping process that we were using, which originally was EFT, and we created a simple tapping approach called simple energy techniques, and we combined that with a provocative style. And we also integrated some techniques from the work of Milton Erickson and the brief strategic therapy group from the Palo Alto Group Mental Research Institute, and paradoxical therapy. And in essence, this makes it a really beautiful mind-body combination, because you are combining a simple process of stimulating acupressure points by tapping on them, which has been found to have very dramatic results in terms of soothing and calming the nervous system reactivity, with the provocative approach, which very quickly gets to the hot, challenging parts of the problem. And also uses humor and exaggeration and heart connection to assist the healing. So yeah, it's a lot of fun. We talk about infecting people with the provocative virus, which is a beneficial virus, unlike other viruses that have been around the world lately. This one leaves you with a feeling of lightness and a capacity to see the absurd side of human existence and problems, and not taking yourself or problems too seriously anymore. So I'm looking forward to sharing this with you and spending time with you. And yeah, I hope you will be there in my session. Thank you. Is that long enough?
Yes, it's long enough. It was very, very detailed. And I think that also during that invitation, you answered one of my questions, but it doesn't matter.
No, that's fine. Well, I didn't know how long you wanted, so I... Anyway.
Okay, yeah, sometimes we do it in the way that, you know, we record quite long invitations, quite long interview, and later cut them into small and shorter pieces. So when we will do it, of course, I will send you the information, how it will be cut and where it will be published. So
great. Okay, fine. As long as you make me look better and use AI to improve me, I'm okay.
You know, it's not me who is working with all that video stuff. So I don't know exactly the effects which can be used, but yeah.
I just have to trust you. It's okay. Yeah.
Okay, great. So Steve, if we can start with, you know, very basic question, what provocative approach mean to you?
Well, the provocative, well, you know, the word provoke means to call out or to draw out, and it's really about calling out and drawing out strengths that that we become blocked off from. And it also is about stimulating things in a very positive way, and using humor, using exaggeration, using pattern interruption to stimulate people to think in different ways and to gain new perspectives on their issues and challenges. What? Are you still there?
Yeah, I'm still there. It was not too short. We don't need, you know, longer discussion around that probably.
You know, I could go longer. Let me know if you want me longer or shorter. I'll do it. Okay.
It can be, you know, different for different questions also, so it's totally okay. And what do you think that provocative approach offers to the practitioner and also to the client, which is on the other side?
Well, first of all, for the client, I think one of the greatest things that it offers for them is relief from suffering, the gaining of new perspectives, lightening up the serious side of life. It releases the pain, and it does that very quickly. It puts them in touch with a light-hearted way of being, and it gets them out of constricted ways of thinking and feeling. Now, it also does the same thing for the practitioner. This is the great thing, that you get to work with people. You have a lot of enjoyment in the session, and you also get paid. And for the practitioner, it's the antidote to burnout. Before learning this, I would be very exhausted in working with some clients. Well, you don't get exhausted using the provocative approach. You get energized. And so there's an energizing factor for the client and for the practitioner in this approach. It wakes you up. It enlivens you. It puts you in touch with your creativity and helps you to access resources that have been hidden. And you can't be creative when you're serious. You can't see a way out of problems when you are serious, when you are contracted and constricted. So it brings you out of contraction into a more expansive way of feeling and being in the world. The other part of this is that there's a big role for the heart connection in this approach. And, you know, Frank taught us that provocative therapy is a way of being in relationships. And so there's a very strong connection that you get with the person in the session and between the participants in a provocative exchange. It's a very special kind of relationship. And I felt it instantly when I worked with Frank the first time back in 1986. And that was what I couldn't get enough of because, you know, I was probably in need of that. You know, I probably came from a sense of not feeling very loved and cared for, and I certainly felt that working with Frank, and I certainly have been able to pass on the benefits of that to my clients.
Great. You mentioned a lot of, you know, advantages of that process for both sides. And do you see any risks in provocative approach?
Well, there is a risk in all helping endeavors that, first of all, that the client and the practitioner may not have a good rapport. And so using a provocative approach, just as with any other helping approach, it's really important to have a very good rapport. This is the ultimate rapport approach. And so rapport becomes rapport and a strong connection and what we call a heart connection becomes absolutely crucial. The other, you know, the dangers are that if there's a mismatching of where the client and practitioner are in terms of the communication. Now, there's meant to be a mismatching. There is an incongruity between those, but there also has to be an understanding on the part of the client that this is for their benefit rather than at their expense. And so, you know, if the ego gets involved, if it's done for the enjoyment of the therapist or practitioner rather than to help the client, then like any approach, it could be destructive if that was the case. That applies to any approach, but because you're having a special type of communication with the provocative approach, the connection is much, much more important.
Yeah, that's true. I think, and also some people think that provocative approach is aggressive because it is based on evoking very strong emotions, you know, sometimes aggressive communication. What is your opinion about that?
Well, my opinion actually is that the most provocative thing and the most difficult thing for a lot of people who experience the provocative approach as clients, the most difficult thing for them to handle is the level of acceptance. And often people are just totally blown away by the amount of love and the amount of acceptance which is coming towards them. Even while the verbal component appears to be rejecting, the majority of the communication through the energy, through the non-verbal communication, which the research shows that people read the non-verbal much more than the verbal. So the content of the communication may seem aggressive or negative, but the feeling essence that's being communicated non-verbally and through the energy and the warm-heartedness of the practitioner is what is overwhelming to a lot of clients, especially those who have had trouble with accepting themselves. So it's a strange thing that, of course, to an observer who's sitting outside the relationship, it may look like an aggressive communication. To the person themselves, they're experiencing it as a great love, as a great acceptance. And that great acceptance sometimes is difficult for people to handle. And so, yeah, funnily enough, the positive can be more provocative than the negative for some people.
Yeah, but that's right. You mentioned, Steve, about your meeting with Frank Farrelly and also how you started with that, but how it happened that you met Frank and you were, curious about provocative approach?
Well, I was very fortunate because when I was doing my master's degree at the university, one of the professors had come from America and he had some audio tapes of provocative therapy. And he played one of these in one of our classes and talked about what was going on. And it was an audio tape of a session with Frank working with an 18-year-old suicide client. And it seemed at the time to me exactly what a lot of people see the provocative as. It seemed aggressive, it seemed negative, it seemed like he was picking on her and even abusing her. But she was laughing in between this, and it was clear that she was getting stronger. And so I was curious about it. And because my teacher knew a little bit about provocative therapy, he was able to translate a little bit of this. Well, a couple of years later, Frank was visiting my home city of Perth in Western Australia. And my friend just happened to find out about this. And he said, I'm going. And I'm like, I have to go too. When I was there in the workshop, I saw Frank doing this work. And again, I was shocked, but I was intrigued. And I had to experience it. So I volunteered to go out and work with Frank in front of the group. And from the very first instant, I felt a beautiful warmth and a beautiful acceptance, along with a comedy show of all my problems and all my faults being blown up and exaggerated. And it was like sitting at my own personal comedy show with Frank sitting alongside me, poking fun at my ridiculous thinking and the blocks that I had got myself caught into. And so I was really hooked. I was by the warmth and the love and the acceptance. Frank doesn't like me to use the word love. He says, oh no, people misinterpret this word. You should use warm-hearted and open-hearted and things like this, because people have their strange reactions to the word love. But I tell people he's dead now, so I'm using the word love because I prefer that word. And it's the one that regular people use when they talk about warmth and connection and really wanting the best for the other person, which was clear that Frank did for me. And anyway, I got hooked, and I then went to his next workshop, and then I got involved in coordinating his workshops in Australia. I ended up meeting Dr. David Lake at an intensive in Wollongong. We became good friends. And then, for years we were traveling around, visited Frank in his home and studied with him there. We became part of what we call the Intergalactic Society for the Advancement of Truth, Sex, Money, and Provocative Therapy, or the Provocative Family Group. And, we had several meetings and with people from all over the world on this. And it was really incredible times and a lot of growth. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's the story which started during studies. So long story, yes. And
yeah. Sorry, it's a long story, but
yeah,
I could give you a shorter version.
No. I think the longest one.
And then I was hooked.
The longest one, was very interesting and also very emotional from your side when you described that. So it really shows that you were hooked and curious about that topic.
Well, for me, Frank really became another father for me. And I think that there was certainly an element of that in the relationship. He was also a mentor and a teacher, and I also became his good friend. And we visited Frank. We even visited him a couple of months before he passed away, and went and saw him at home. And I miss him a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. It's great that you had opportunity to meet him, yes, and work with him. So
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
Okay, so going further with the interview, what are the ethical frameworks of provocative approach which you see and which you are using?
Well, I think the key is that this is always for the benefit of the client. And you judge your results by what happens for the client. As Frank used to say, if the client says you bombed, then you bombed. And so I think, anyone who is going to do this work has to focus on improving the conditions of the client. And if you do that, and you retain a focus on that, then you don't need 25 pages of an ethical code to keep you on track. You just focus on what's happening for the client and make sure that you do things for their benefit only. That's it.
Yeah, very clear and easy from one side. Sometimes a little bit more difficult in practice, yes, but
well, it's because what we do has a certain amount of ambiguity. But if you learn to read non-verbal communication, then you can see that you're on the client's wavelength. And if you stray too far from that, then you're going to get in trouble. And so it's always important that you have some way of knowing that you are actually getting through to the client, that the things that you are coming up with are resonating for them, they fit within their own internal frame of reference, and so on.
Yeah, exactly. You also mentioned about the humor in provocative approach. How important it is?
Well, it's crucial, but it's just as crucial as being serious. The provocative approach seems so humorous because it actually uses humor. And most other approaches to counseling and coaching and therapy are very grim. They're very serious. They're very rigid. And so Frank taught me that being humorous is just as important as being serious. It's the blend of these two. It's the tragic mask combined with the comic mask that makes for human experiencing. And really all that Frank did was he brought the comic mask in where it was conspicuously missing from most other approaches, because everybody was so enamored with tragedy and difficulty and trauma and heaviness. And so all of those things are important, but as much as joy and light and fun and humor and laughter, and this provides a counterpoint to that stuff, and it's more true, it's more real. I think sometimes in therapy it's an unreal situation, whereas Frank brought the reality back into it. Now, of course, the humor was Frank was a bit of a cowboy, and he was really over the top with some of his humor, and he was a great actor and a bit of and loved to play, but which makes things larger than life. but also he was exaggerating the reality for the client. This is important to realize. So he would get into the tragedy and just go further with that. He would get into the difficulty and go further with that and blow it out. And that's when it became humorous and ridiculous. And when people were able to see how they were binding themselves in the situation and how they could get free. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's the tool which is used in that method, yes, to exaggerate, as you mentioned, the
exaggeration
situation.
is only one. Yeah, exaggeration is one way of using humor, and it's a very big pattern. Of course, there are many humorous patterns within the provocative approach. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so maybe let's talk also about your work. What exactly you do now?
Okay. So what I do now is really a blend of the provocative approach with what's called energy psychology. And energy psychology is an approach which looks at the human energy system, mostly associated with the body energy and life energy. And of course, most of the approaches that have been researched here are those that involve stimulating energy lines in the body, such as the energy meridian lines and so on, that are basically the same points that are used in acupressure and acupuncture. So the tapping techniques, EFT and our own SET. So EFT is emotional freedom techniques. It's the most well-known approach to stimulating these energy points on the body by tapping on them. And it's sometimes just called tapping. It's called EFT or EFT tapping, emotional freedom techniques. There are a number of other variations of this around the world, and our SET, simple energy techniques, is just a simplification of this. And stimulating these particular points has been shown to have profound effects in terms of relieving emotional stress. It's been found to have very significant results in reducing anxiety, relieving phobias, helping people get over post-traumatic stress and traumatic stress in their system. There is evidence showing that it positively influences brain activity, reduces cortisol, increases positive drugs and chemicals in the brain, changes the nature of brain activity. There's a lot of research on it. In fact, when I learned about this, I got involved and I ran a study on EFT out at Curtin University, and we took a bunch with phobias and we gave them a single 30-minute treatment, and we randomly allocated them to two different treatment approaches. And the results for the tapping on the energy points were highly significant and superior and lasting when we tested them again 6 to 9 months later. Since that time, there have been hundreds of studies on these approaches showing that they are evidence-based and very effective and very efficient. So we combine the power of that, what could be called somatic or body approach, with the provocative approach. And the provocative approach brings in humor, it brings in the heart connection and energy, it brings in pattern interruption techniques, it brings in different ways of seeing problems and issues. It brings in a whole range of techniques that have been found to be very, very effective at getting people to shift the way they think and feel. It also, and what makes these approaches work hand in glove, is that the tapping approach tends to work best when you can tune into the darkest part of the problem. And of course, when you do that, that's what we do all the time with the provocative approach, but we do it also with humor. And so the humor, as well as the tapping, actually combines to create a beautiful harmonizing and relieving effect in the body for the feelings associated, the hot, difficult feelings associated with the problem, while also expanding the person's way of thinking and seeing things so that they can see their way out of difficulties.
Yeah, it's very interesting. To be honest, before I contacted you for the first time, of course, I was reading about your methods, and I was impressed and surprised on the other hand, because I knew the provocative approach from one side. I also had the contact with tapping. It's not very popular in Poland, but when I was in India, I was on a short session of tapping, but the combination of both of the methods was surprising for me. And when I started to read, it was wow.
Well, it's funny because we started using EFT, and in EFT, when you address a problem, you start by having the person say a statement such as, even though I have this problem, I deeply and completely accept myself. And that's just part of the EFT process. But we noticed when we did that everybody would have a reaction to saying that they accepted themselves, because of course they didn't accept themselves. They were upset at themselves for having the problem. So in fact, we started very quickly adapting this approach and having them say, even though I have this problem, I deeply and completely reject myself. And they would smile and laugh and nod their heads and say, yes, I do reject myself because I have this problem. And so we found that that was a very quick way of getting rapport with the problem. And we started using it in that way right from the very beginning. Ultimately, we changed the approach completely, and we did away with the need for these particular setup statements. And we simply adapted a process of tapping on these acupressure points while playing provocatively with the issues. And it just is, it works very, very well together. It's just like a hand in glove. Yeah.
Great combination. What kind of clients do you work with?
Well, I have had the good fortune to work with all kinds of different clients. First of all, I've maintained a practice as a psychologist for since 1986, the same year I started learning provocative therapy. And so I've worked with a range of clients as a psychologist. I've also done a lot of work in the corporate area with people who are in business, from people who are frontline workers through to leaders of major companies. And I've also spent a significant amount of time working with athletes on performance issues, and worked in about 15 different sporting areas with athletes on their performance. I've also worked all over the world in many, many different countries, and run public programs and had people come along to those programs. So, we'll be heading back to Italy and France this year. Before the pandemic, we were going regularly to many of these places, and for the last few years, we've been doing a lot of work online, but now we're getting back involved in doing workshops. And so some of those, basically whoever comes, whoever turns up. And so, yeah, I've been able to work with a wide range of different people.
Yeah.
Also, I probably should mention I spent a lot of time running specific training programs for counselors and coaches and therapists. Yeah.
So very different groups of people, and for people from whole world, I would say. Yeah.
Not the whole world yet, but we're getting there.
You are close to that. And when talking about, the word and perception of methods, how provocative approach and also EFT is perceived in your country?
Well, first of all, the tapping and EFT is getting more accepted worldwide, but it's still having difficulty being accepted by some professional groups, because science proceeds by the death of old scientists, and the old scientists still push back against the new methods. Now, this has always been the case with provocative therapy, and to some extent, Frank didn't even ever expect provocative approach to become orthodox. And it won't be, because not everybody can get it. Not everybody can see it. Some people only can see the surface level of what's happening. They don't understand. Some people don't understand warmth in relationships. They think that communication is only the words that are spoken, or only the verbal part rather than the non-verbal, rather than the feeling and the energy that's being expressed. And so not everybody is going to get this. But I would say in both areas there is an improvement in acceptance ultimately. Now, I think there's a big need for the provocative approach, but there's also a danger at the moment that people are more easily offended, and people are more easily angered, and the whole world seems not to be laughing anymore. And I think there's never been a greater need for the provocative approach to get more out there. But there's a challenge, because some people don't get the joke. And some people don't even think that you should joke. You know, there was a psychoanalyst many years ago who wrote a book arguing against using humor in psychotherapy. He said it's always inevitably destructive. And you know, Frank said, and I agree with him, he was right. He should not use humor, because he wouldn't know how to do it and he would muck it up. So, but for most people, humor helps them to feel better. It helps them to live longer. It helps them to be more creative. It gets them out of stuckness, and it's very valuable. Yeah.
Yeah, it has very positive effect. So hopefully people will still understand jokes and yeah, be able to smile and take the humor from us.
Yeah, it doesn't work so well if you have to keep saying it's a joke. It's a joke, you know.
Yeah. Now you can laugh.
But of course, as Frank taught us, you don't just tell them that, you show them that by putting a smile on your face and a twinkle in your eye and so on. And that communicates that this is play, this is humor. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned about somehow the future and some risks. And yeah, what, in your opinion, is the future of such methods?
Well, I hope that there is a big future for them, because ultimately humor is the one thing that no autocracy can stand, and no you know, rigid, because we have the potential of rigid authoritarian structures ruling the world and so on. And humor is the one thing that offers life in this kind of environment. And so, you know, there's a lot of serious stuff that's happening in the world, and humor is the antidote to the suffering of this. You know, we do need a certain amount of acceptance of what's happening in the world, and humor helps us with accepting the difficult things that we have to put up with, such as new governments and so on. In Australia, we say it doesn't matter who you vote for, the government always gets in, and you have to cope with the government. And one of the ways that you can cope with ridiculous governments is by poking fun at them. And Australians have always done that. It's part of our culture, and we want to help the rest of the world to do that too.
Yeah, we are also good in it, especially with the previous government in Poland. Now it's a little bit better. But it's a good attitude in many situations.
Very much. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, I'm looking at my list of questions, and I think that we went through all of them. Oh, there is one more. Do you use supervision in your methods, and what do you think about it?
Well, I think supervision is essential for anyone who's working in the helping field, because you can get too close to your own issues and you can get too close to some clients, and so that you get absorbed into their system. And so having supervision allows you to work on them from outside that arena and to gain perspective on the work that you do. Plus, if you're going to improve, then you need constant supervision to develop yourself as a practitioner. So when I train practitioners, there's a requirement. There's a certain requirement in terms of practice with other students. There's a certain amount of requirement in terms of practice with clients, and there's a certain amount of requirement in terms of having mentoring and supervision of your approach, so that you can improve the way you work. And so that you can also find more than one way of doing things. You know, we all need to expand our response repertoire, as Frank would call it. We need to expand our requisite variety, is a term that was used by Richard Bandler. He said Frank Farrelly is an exquisite example of requisite variety. This is like having more options, having more different ways to respond rather than only a few different ways to respond. And the more ways that you have to respond, the more you can work with more clients with more issues and so on.
Yeah, that's right. You've got opportunity to look for some new methods. And as you mentioned, it's also important not to go too close to the client, to the topics which are important for you as a practitioner also.
Also, we used to do this with Frank. You know, Frank used to bring up all the difficult issues, you know, difficult issues like some people can handle anger, but they can't handle an angry client if the anger is directed towards them, you know. Then some people can work with clients who are, you know, sexually attracted towards them, but then what do you do if you're sexually attracted towards the client? Well, basically, if you can't work through those issues, then you need to refer that client to somebody else. And, you know, so there are all kinds of difficult issues. Some of them are like, for example, working with trauma, working with very highly traumatized clients. If you are going to get traumatized by their stuff, then you're going to have difficulty working with those clients. And so this is why your own self-work, your own self-development, your own supervision is important as a practitioner.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Steve, is there any other topic which you would like to mention from your side?
Well, no, I just want to say, look, the fun has gone out of a lot of life for a lot of people, and I'd like to see a lot more fun come back in. And I think one of the things about the provocative approach is it's a lot of fun. It's fun for the practitioner and it's fun for the client. And therapy and counseling wasn't meant to be fun when I learned it, but Frank taught me that it can be fun, and that you know, as he said, a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. Well, all right, now we know sugar's not necessarily so good for you, but hey, you can still have fun in ways that are all positive for you. And so I like the idea of injecting a little bit of fun into what we do, and I think we all have a need for it.
Yeah, totally agree. And also having fun from the work you do Yes, and on the other side, seeing the results is, I think, the perfect combination. Yeah.
I think this is the thing, you know. I tell people I'm good at finding the shit. I have a very good shit detector, and so it's like I say, oh, does this hurt? And the person goes, oh. But when they do have that reaction, I think, okay, good. We have found the area of greatest pain. Because Frank taught me that what you want to do is you want to find the area of greatest pain as quickly as possible and release it and relieve it. And so, yeah, I even get happy when we found the big part of the issue, because then I know that the person is on the way to getting that relieved. And it's so fantastic seeing them laughing at what a moment ago was causing them to cry or be terrorized by or be terrified by. Yeah.
Yeah, wonderful. So, Steve, thank you very much for that and sharing all